Okay. Can I go now or?
Yeah, let me just I'll give the introduction. So we'll just let everyone in. I still see people coming in the waiting room.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like we've got everyone in now. So thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar Wednesday. My name's Ashley Mueller, and I'm the Manager of Educational Programs at NBPHE. Today's topic is an overview of wildfires in the United States presented by Aliba Syed. Alipa graduated with her MPH with a concentration in epidemiology from the University of California, Irvine. She graduated from UC Irvine in June 2022 and is certified in public health. After graduating from UC Irvine, Alipa worked as a research data analyst in the Health, Society, and Behavior Department of UC Irvine and had her first article published in the Journal of Consumer Health by Taylor and Francis. Alipa now works as a research associate at the East California University at the Brody School of Medicine for Pediatrics and Cardiovascular Science Department. She collaborates with faculty, fellows, and residents and moves their research projects towards publication. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Alipa.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for the nice introduction, Ashley. So hi everyone, I'm Aliba Syed, and today I will be giving an overview of wildfires in the Western United States. So in today's lecture, we will go over the basics of wildfires, such as their types, how they're initiated, and how they spread. Next, we will learn about wildfire impacts on people, specifically how wildfires impact people's health. I will also share with you all wildfire statistics in fire-prone states of California, Texas, and North Carolina. I would like to mention that in 2024 alone, these states encountered the largest number of wildfires throughout the country. We will further discuss prevention measures, role of firefighters and the government, and some of the challenges that occur with wildfire control. And lastly, I would like to share with you all a brief overview on a wildfire risk communication project that I conducted with another public health professional. So before I start giving details on wildfire basics and causes, I want to go over the most recent Palisades and Eaton fires that began in California from January 7th of 2025. They are being considered to be two of the most destructive wildfires in California wildfire history. This was also quite an unusual time for a wildfire disaster to occur, since wildfire season occurs in California during the fall of each year. The cause of Palisades fire is still under investigation, but for the Eaton fires, power line damage is reported to be a possible cause. The Palisades fire started at 10:30 a.m. in the morning, and with the wind speed being as high as 40 miles per hour, the fires reached 200 acres just within 2 hours. And Eaton fires have been reported to start shortly after the Palisades fires. So both of these fires have destroyed at least 12,000 structures, including buildings, garages, and sheds. Unfortunately, about 29 people lost their lives and 150,000 people had to evacuate across LA. The fires have been contained, but rehabilitation efforts are still ongoing. As we move forward with the presentation, I will give further details on rehabilitation efforts. Okay, so now let's understand the basics and types of wildfires. So wildfires as defined by the National Geographic are uncontrolled fires that burn in the wildland vegetation. They can occur in forests, grasslands, and other ecosystems. Before we move on to the spread of wildfires and the damage they cause, let's go over the three types of wildfires, which are ground fires, surface fires, and crown fires. Ground fires can be fueled by thick organic matter under the ground, such as plant roots. Surface fires, as the name suggests, occur on vegetation lying above the ground and can be fueled by parched grass or fallen leaves on the surface. And lastly, we have ground fires, which involve burning of both tall shrubs and trees, and both of these lie above the surface. Now, after understanding the basics and types of wildfires, let's briefly go over how climate change has an impact on current wildfires. With the passage of time, weather conditions, especially in the western United States, have started getting hotter and drier. In fact, many US regions now encounter longer periods of drought. This is why both the number of and intensity of wildfires are increasing. And if such conditions remain, areas such as the Arctic that never encountered wildfires are expected to face wildfire damage as well. Such an increase in wildfires will not only lead to the burning of natural areas, but nearby communities will be damaged as well. So, after understanding the impact of climate change on wildfires, let's go over some of their causes. They can occur both naturally and due to human activities. Some of the natural causes of wildfires are weather conditions such as sun's heat or lightning. And as discussed in the previous slide, changes in climate also contribute to wildfires due to alterations in weather conditions. However, most of the wildfires that have occurred in the past have been due to human activities such as unattended campfires, fireworks, and discarded cigarettes. No matter what the causes are, the following three components ignite a fire: fuel, heat, and oxygen. When these three components react together, that is when a fire occurs. Both the natural causes and human activities can result in the initiation of a chemical reaction to start a fire. Let's briefly understand how wildfires can spread and damage thousands of acres in a short matter of time. Both the intensity and the movement of a wildfire depends on the following three factors: fuel, weather, and topography. Some plants, trees, and shrubs contain oil that serves as a fuel which causes more intense and quick burns. Weather conditions also affect fire's behavior. For example, wind can supply extra oxygen to it. And lastly, we have the topographical features such as slope and elevation, which also determine how fast the fire would spread. A fire is bound to spread quickly uphill if it ignites at the bottom of the steep slope because the heat rises further uphill. So, according to the image, the wind pushes the fire upslope, resulting in the heat from fire rising further upward. So, this will become clearer in the next slide, where I will share a video with you all that goes over how the topography influences the spread of wildfires. Okay, Ashley, could you play this for us?
Yes, just give me a second to share my screen.
All right.
Hello and welcome back to Wildfire Explained, the weekly show where we go over the key aspects of wildfire. Topography is the configuration of the Earth's surface, and the influence it has on wildfire is more easily predicted than that of fuel or weather because it changes over a longer time span. The three most important topographic characteristics are slope, aspect, and position because of the effects they have on fuel moisture and temperature. So when it comes to slope, the steeper the slope is, the faster the fire is going to spread, and especially when going uphill. Now, the reason for this is because the fuels are getting into closer contact with the flames below because of the flame tilting up the hill. So it's that convection and radiation that preheats those fuels and makes them more likely to ignite in the future. The other concern when it comes to slopes is burning material rolling down the hill and starting new little fires below the major blaze. Aspect is another characteristic of topography, which is defined as the direction a slope faces. The key thing this has an impact on is how much sunlight that slope gets, which then has an impact on the types of fuels that you have, the conditions of the fuels, and how much of those fuels are present. So on the north-facing slopes, that's where it's a little bit shadier. That's where you're going to have lower temperatures, heavier fuels, higher relative humidity, and higher fuel moisture. So wildfire isn't as much of a concern. On the flip side, on the south slopes, that's where you get more sun exposure. So that's where you get lighter fuels, you get higher temperatures, lower relative humidity, and lower fuel moisture. So this is where wildfire is most critical because it's where an ignition is most easily occurs, and then once that ignition does occurs, that fire can spread rapidly. Finally, we have position, which is another characteristic of topography, and you can refer to this as the lower, middle, or upper parts of a slope. So you can regard this as elevation, which, just like aspect, affects what kinds of fuels you have, how much those fuels are in place, and what kind of characteristics those fuels are in. So just like the south-facing slopes, fuels at lower elevations will typically be hotter, drier, and lighter. So ignitions are more likely, and once fire does start, it can spread more rapidly than the cooler, heavier fuels in the slope above. So you can also refer to topography with regards to its specific features, like canyons, ridges, saddles, or barriers. When it comes to a narrow canyon, you can think of a fire burning on one side of the canyon. Due to radiation or spotting, it can actually jump across the canyon. And then if a fire starts at the base of a narrow canyon or a box canyon, it can actually behave just like a fire in a wood-burning stove or a fireplace. It can generate winds and upslope flow, which can rapidly spread the fire and is referred to as the chimney effect. This can lead to some extreme fire behavior and in some cases can be very dangerous. Then in a wide canyon, it's basically the opposite of a narrow canyon. Because it's wide, that spotting and that radiation isn't as likely to happen. The key thing in a wide canyon is there will likely be a big difference between the fire behavior on the north-facing slopes and the south-facing slopes. Then when it comes to ridges, this is a place where the fire will most likely slow down in its rate of spread as it encounters winds blowing directly into it from the upslope flow on the other ridgeline. However, with those winds converging, that can lead to some erratic fire behavior, and especially where winds on one side of the slope are much stronger than on the other side. And then where you have a chute or a ladder, you can think of the wind flowing into this constricted space, so the winds are speeding up, and that can make your fire burn faster, have a faster rate of spread, or even change directions in some cases. Then finally, we have natural and constructed barriers. These are things that can either slow or completely stop the rate of spread of a fire. This can be natural things like rivers or rocks, or it can be constructed things like roads or perhaps a containment line made by firefighters. So that's the topographic influence on wildfires. Stay tuned for next time where we'll be discussing fuels. Thanks for watching.
Perfect. I'm sorry, yeah, let me share my slides again. Okay, so I hope that now everyone is clear on the factors that influence the spread of wildfires. Now let's understand the health impacts of wildfires on people. According to the current statistics, wildfire smoke has resulted in 339,000 deaths annually worldwide. In the western United States, fires create layers of stagnant air that holds down smoke in areas where people breathe. This results in airborne particles entering one's body, harming their respiratory system. Smoke from fire also contains carbon monoxide, which can cause long term damage to one's heart. The increase in fires over the years has increased the number of asthma attacks, emergency room, and hospital visits. The pollution that occurs due to wildfires has also been found to be linked to higher levels of psychological distress. Now, in the next few slides, I will go over the wildfire statistics in three different states of the US. According to the World Population Review, just in 2024 alone, California encountered 9,280 wildfires. Nevertheless, every year, thousands of fires that occur in California result in the loss of billions of dollars. A point that I would like to make here is that most of these fires start on a small scale. However, larger fires are becoming more common with the passage of time. Before 2025, the five most destructive wildfires that occurred in California were the Camp Fire of 2018, Tubbs Fire of 2017, Tunnel Fire of 1991, Cedar Fire of 2003, and North Complex Fire of 2020. The Palisades and Eaton fires of 2025 that I went over in the beginning of this lecture are now part of this list as well. Some of the causes of Californian wildfires have been found to be power lines, electrical systems, lightning, and arson. So now let's look at the trends of California wildfire by decade. So I would like to mention here that the x-axis demonstrates the number of wildfires, whereas these bars represent the number of acres burned in millions. So if we look at the decade of 1979 to 1988, we see here that 3.3 millions of acres were burned due to wildfires, and this number has been raised to around 7 million in the most recent decade of 2009 to 2018. Now let's go over wildfire facts and statistics of Texas. In 2024, Texas encountered 5,576 fires. Also, due to climate change, wildfire season has extended in Texas as well, but the most severe wildfire season occurs here during the periods of February to April. Along with climate change, increase in population and changes in land use elevate the risk of extreme wildfire damages in different regions of the state. In 2011, Texas encountered the most devastating wildfire season. About 3,000 homes were destroyed and 4 million of acres were burned. The year of 2021 saw 6,039 fires in Texas, which resulted in the burning of 158,612 acres. In February of 2024, millions of acres were burned in the Smokehouse Creek fire, leading to a huge loss of livestock, crops, and infrastructure. The causes of lots of large fires that recently occurred in Texas are either unknown or under investigation. However, a couple of known causes were listed to be downed power lines and ranch equipment. Now let's look at some of the wildfire statistics in North Carolina. In 2023, the state encountered about 5,000 fires, resulting in 18,748 acres of land burning. So even though this is not as much of a great loss as both California and Texas faced, both the number of fires and the amount of acre that burned each year in this state have been increasing since 2021. So the graph here shows the causes and number of wildfires that have been occurring in North Carolina from 1970 to 2018. And here we see that the largest number of wildfires occurred in 1980. And during this time, it was about 9,000 fires that occurred in 1980. And then some of the causes listed here are camping, smoking, and debris burning, among others. And we also see that each year, debris burning contributes the most to the number of wildfires compared to other causes. So now in the next few slides, I would like to go over some of the specific health impacts on people due to wildfires and the current literature on this topic. In this slide, I will discuss the health impacts on people attributed to wildfire smoke as reported by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA for short. Regarding the groups of at-risk people, children, pregnant women, and elderly have been found to be more vulnerable to wildfire-related health threats, and this group of people is already susceptible to developing other chronic conditions. Wildfire smoke is a complex mixture that contains both particulate matter and other pollutants, which could lead to a variety of negative health impacts. Health effects from exposure to wildfire smoke range from minor issues such as eye and respiratory tract infection to major health problems like exacerbation of asthma and or heart failure and even premature deaths. Inhaling particulate matter may also make it difficult for one's body to remove other inhaled foreign material, such as bacteria and viruses, from the lungs. Exposure to a higher concentration of fine particles can lead to persistent coughing, wheezing, and difficulty in breathing. Even in healthy people, such an exposure can result in pulmonary inflammation. I would like to point out that currently there is a limited number of studies evaluating the association between wildfire smoke and health threats. Now, in the next slide, I will go over the current ongoing research on this. So, according to EPA, researchers have not been fully able to understand the human health effects associated with both short term and long term exposure to wildfires. Researchers are particularly interested in finding answers to the following questions. What is the full extent of health effects from smoke exposure? Who is most at risk? Are there differences in health effects from different wildfire tubes or combustion phases, for example, burning versus flaming? What strategies and approaches are most effective in protecting public health? What are the environmental, social, and economic impacts of wildfire emissions? Some of the ongoing research includes animal toxicology studies to explore physiological mechanisms of action that are followed by being exposed to smoke in order to better understand the severity of both lung and heart problems. Studies are also examining air quality and public health impacts of smoke. A social science approach is also being utilized to understand the health and economic costs that result due to changes in air quality. Some literature on components from wildfire smoke are damaging to health and which populations are particularly more vulnerable. So, research does suggest that the particulate matter from wildfire smoke is more harmful to human health compared to the particulate matter from other sources. A few research studies have also suggested that people of color are more vulnerable to health threats from wildfires. A retrospective study conducted on Medicaid enrollees found that Black people had a higher risk of respiratory hospitalizations due to wildfire smoke compared to white people. Similarly, Alaskan natives were found to have higher odds of asthma related emergency visits to hospitals due to wildfire smoke exposure compared to non Alaskan natives. I do want to point out that such studies did not have large sample sizes, and currently a limited amount of research exists on wildfire smoke impacting the health of people of color, and so even this topic is still being investigated. So, after learning about the impacts of wildfires and wildfire smoke on people, let's learn about how they damage wildlife as well. Wildfires have been found to create a life threatening situation for animals. Some animals, both big and small, cannot outrun a fire. Koalas, for example, crawl up into a tree during wildfires, which makes them more vulnerable to damages from it. Some of the immediate effects of wildfire include both habitat loss and loss of food and water resources, resulting in animals moving to a newer territory. This further results in higher risks of being exposed to their predators and vehicle strikes. Some animals may also be endemic to particular areas, and if such areas are impacted by wildfires, those species may be lost and may result in extinction. As wildfires are threatening towards people's health, damaging their property along with wildlife, let's go over some of the prevention measures discussed in the next slide. So, I have listed some of the wildfire prevention strategies on this slide. So, even though natural conditions that could start a fire are not really in our control, there are numerous ways to prevent those fires that occur due to human activities. Also, during the dry and summer seasons, we should avoid all types of activities that could spark a fire. According to the Frontline Wildfire Defense, there are multiple ways to prevent fires from happening. These ways include, but are not limited to, managing home ignition zones, such as by removing flammable materials from one's home perimeter, avoiding fireworks, keeping children away from handling flammable materials, never leaving a campfire unattended, avoiding off-roading during a dry weather, and installing an exterior sprinkler system. I would also like to point out that by managing home ignition zones and installing sprinkler systems, a number of homes and communities could be protected from wildfires as they would prevent them from spreading further as well. So, after an area is impacted by wildfires, emergency stabilization becomes a priority for preventing further damage to life, property, and other natural resources. This stabilization begins during the wildfire period and may continue for up to a year. Once the fire is out, rehabilitation efforts begin to repair the damage caused by these wildfires, and such efforts sustain for several years. The Burnt Area Emergency Response, or BEAR for short, is a program for addressing wildfire related crises. Its key goals include protecting life, property, natural and cultural resources. The staff of BEAR team includes professional soil scientists, engineers, biologists, among many others, who evaluate burnt areas and prescribe stabilization treatments accordingly. Such evaluation usually occurs before the wildfire has been completely put down. The focus areas for treatment include severely burned areas, campgrounds, and certain valuable facilities where stabilization treatments need to be installed as soon as possible to prevent further damage. The BEAR team may recommend a variety of treatments depending on the type of area burned. One recommendation is reseeding ground cover with native species. BEAR activities are funded by special emergency wildfire funds. However, the amount of funding depends on the severity of the wildfire season. Firefighters, our heroes, truly dedicate themselves to protecting people's lives and properties during these tough times. I will go over the vital role that they play in suppressing wildfires and will go over some of their responsibilities as well. Wildland firefighters contribute to the protection of people, property, natural resources, and environmental ecosystems from wildfire damage. They work as a team to combat and suppress wildfires occurring in forests, grasslands, and other wilderness areas. They are responsible for constructing fire lines, utilizing hand tools and equipment, and coordinating with other firefighters and emergency responders. Their duties include fire suppression, fire behavior analysis, equipment operation, fire prevention and education, teamwork and communication, safety and emergency response, and incident management support. Fires are suppressed by constructing fire lines, removal of vegetation, and creating barriers to prevent further wildfire spread are necessary for this suppression as well. In order to analyze fire behavior, firefighters examine factors such as weather conditions, topography, fuel types, and fire patterns to determine the intensity and direction of wildfires. Firefighters are trained in equipment use, and some of their equipment include chainsaws, shovels, and other specific hand tools. They can also use heavy machinery like bulldozers to remove obstacles and or create fire control measures. Firefighters also play a crucial role in educating the public on fire safety and responsible fire practices. They also communicate effectively with other firefighters and emergency responders to ensure efficient response and safe operations. They get extensive training in fire behavior, personal protective equipment use, first aid, and emergency response protocols. They can also be a part of an incident management team where they assist in logical support, resource coordination, and effective allocation of firefighting resources. Now, I will briefly go over what the government is doing and what it can further do to help against wildfire disasters. The government is currently working to build community resilience, which depends on the ability to prepare better for anticipated natural disasters, adapt to changing conditions, and recover quickly. The following federal departments help with wildfire prevention, mitigation, and recovery: Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA for short, National Interagency Fire Center, U.S. Department of Agriculture Forest Service, U.S. Fire Administration, U.S. Department of Interior and Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission. So FEMA can provide people, equipment, technical help, and grants for wildfire mitigation and response efforts. The National Interagency Fire Center holds fire suppression resources and has a weather monitoring base to review weather patterns for assessing wildfire risk. Forest firefighters respond to fires in national forests and grasslands. The Fire Administration provides resources and grants to reduce the impact of wildfires in communities. U.S. Department of Interior has an Office of Wildland Fire that pays for personnel and equipment needed for suppressing fires. Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission drafts strategies and policy recommendations on wildfire prevention, management, suppression, and recovery. Along with these departments working on fire mitigation and suppression, the government needs to implement land use policies that limit fire risk, incentivize better land management, and encourage stronger coordination to reduce conflicting land practices. Let's understand the challenges that come with controlling wildfires. The US Department of Interior manages large tracts of forest lands, of which many are of importance to certain tribal communities. Wildfires have devastated such lands, killing lots of native species belonging to such forests. Not only are such native species being lost, but invasive ones are thriving, which make the landscape even more flammable. In fact, such invasive plants are impacting various areas of the western US. This results in an increased amount of wildfires, and suppressing wildfires in such ecosystem can become costly. They are also fast moving, so they put both the communities and wildland firefighters at risk. The increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires also have negative impacts on wildland firefighters. Research suggests that firefighters are at an elevated risk for mental health impacts due to both their work environment and the increased number of wildfires. The interior is addressing the challenges that come with invasive plant species by providing fuel treatment. It is also fully committed to providing mental health support to our very hardworking firefighters. And now for the final slide, I would like to briefly discuss a recent research project that I conducted with another public health professional on wildfires. This project was on evaluating US based wildfire infographics in English. We were able to collect and evaluate 78 relevant wildfire infographics. Our evaluation was based on a customized evaluation tool, which was created after reviewing relevant literature that assessed other health based infographics. We rated our infographics as having high, medium, and low quality. So, most of the infographics that we were able to track were fact based, where wildfire history and area burnt and damaged were discussed. We were not able to find wildfire infographics that were customized for vulnerable populations. This may be due to the limited amount of literature that exists on the most at risk populations that I mentioned during this lecture. And then we were also only able to find a couple of infographics that addressed wildfire's impacts on health. Among the 78 infographics collected, only a few of them gave tips on prevention. The infographic shown here was one of the few prevention infographics that we were able to find. It got a score of a high quality infographic because of its appropriateness in theme, information, and color. Based on our findings, we recommended that infographics be customized for vulnerable populations, address health issues, and give useful prevention tips. We also believe that audience feedback is quite essential before disseminating infographics out in the public. Increase in wildfire research is bound to result in an increased and better quality of infographics that could guide the public even more. So yeah, here are my resources. And do we have any questions?
All right, well, thank you so much, Aliba. If you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A section and we will answer them now. All right, so to start off, let me see, what questions do we have? Yeah, so for the first question, apart from receding ground cover with native species, what other activities does BAER recommend for wildfire suppression?
All right, so yeah, so this team they come up with multiple steps to stabilize a wildfire. And then, apart from reseeding the ground cover with native species, they also help in installing debris traps by modifying road and drainage systems. And then, modification and removal of culverts may also occur so that drainage could be allowed for those debris traps.
Another question. What have been some of the health impacts of wildfires on wildland firefighters?
Okay, so currently, very few studies exist on this topic, but among those few studies, literature has found that there has been a decline in the lung function of wildland firefighters due to being exposed to smoke. And some other studies have found that they are at an increased risk of lung cancer and cardiovascular diseases. And this is based on both the duration of this career and exposure to wildfire smoke. And as I mentioned in the lecture as well, that if wildfire is like really large, and they have violent firefighters have to encounter larger fires, so they may also become psychologically distressed.
Thank you. The next question, has there been any research in the effects of social media on wildfire detection, firefighting wildfires or evacuation initiatives? So does social media playing a role in any of that from the research you've seen?
Yeah, social media, yeah, it does help. Like when I was doing my research, when I was conducting that wildfire risk communication project, so a lot of the infographics that we collected were from social media. But then again, like again, as most of the infographics were fact-based. So there wasn't a lot of guidance on like how there could be prevention or like what to do in evacuation. Like we did find some infographics, but most of them were fact-based and about the number of area that was damaged. But yeah, like using social media could help, and that's why we suggested that audience feedback is necessary for those before we disseminate infographics out in the public so that we could like take their advice into consideration as well. Yeah.
Um, so one question is about fires. What is the difference between the two combustion phases of burning and flaming?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So your burning is a slow combustion process and it doesn't really create flames because much of the energy from burning is actually converted to light energy. Now, flaming is actually the visible and gaseous part of fire, and it is what typically produces flames.
Um, so this question is about people of color. Is it because of chronic diseases that people of color are more vulnerable to respiratory effects of wildfire?
Yes, so again, a limited amount of research exists on this, and yeah, that has been listed to be one of the reasons that because they are already vulnerable to certain conditions, that is what makes them more susceptible to respiratory diseases. So yeah, that has been listed to be one of the reasons.
Another question. I'm interested in the details you mentioned about effective communication. What recommendations did you give for creating an effective flyer?
Oh, so yeah, so there are actually guidelines for creating infographics. And then while when we were like doing this research, so we found an international study that also evaluated they evaluated health-based infographics. So the tool that they used and some of the guidelines that we found, we rated our infographics based on that, and then we like gave some advice on like what should be done for those infographics. So we like evaluated those collected infographics, headings, clarity of content, readability, and how their visuals reflected the written content. And then these items or subsections were scored on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest score and 5 being the highest score. So some of the recommendations that we gave was that these infographics should be customized for vulnerable populations, and also health impacts need to be addressed as well because there weren't a lot of infographics based on that. Um, and yeah, so again, like CDC has guidelines, and then there are some other sources as well on how on what makes a good infographic. So that's what we use to um, basically like rate our infographics. Yeah.
Another question. Could you speak to how wildfires could affect Louisiana? States that are not accustomed to responding to wildfires, or sorry, let me start over. So, thinking about states that don't usually have wildfires like Louisiana, how can states who are not accustomed to responding to wildfires ensure that they are efficiently managing the emergency?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. And well, I can say that like the firefighters over there, or like the people who are responsible for managing any sort of natural disasters, they could take guidelines from what is happening in those states that are fire prone, and then like maybe utilize those guidelines into helping that state which is like currently that wildfire is occurring. So then again, like there are techniques for stabilization, and like as I mentioned that there like bear has certain activities like reseeding ground cover with native species. So again, like taking guidelines from what they like already know, from what has already happened in the past in those fire prone states. So yeah, that could help.
Another question, how can ranch equipment cause wildfires?
All right, so farm equipment fires are quite common, especially in Texas, and they can be caused by several different sources, including smoking, improper refueling methods, overheated engines, and defects in the ignition systems.
Great. All right. With the use of artificial intelligence, are there any research or plans to use this technology to aid in combating wildfires in states with frequent fires?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good question, but I'm not sure if artificial intelligence has been utilized for that purpose. But yeah, like this could be actually a good research question. And yeah, this could be further researched on. But yeah, thank you for bringing up a like, really nice question.
Yeah, yeah. AI is probably top of mind and rapidly changing. So that definitely is something that could potentially be something in the future. All right, just one last question about the recent wildfires. Do you know how many acres were burned in the recent wildfires in 2025?
Yes, so both the Eaton and Palisade fires destroyed around 40,000 acres, with Eaton fires contributing more to the damage as compared to the Palisades fire.
Crazy. So early in the year already. All right. So as far as questions, I think that's everything from the audience. You can get CPH recertification credits. And I do see a question asking how to get those credits. So you'll just need to log into your CPH portal and add in this webinar to report it. So make sure you do that to make sure that you record those credits if you are CPH certified to make sure you're getting those credits and you have those already recorded for you. I'd like to say a special thank you to Aliba for today for presenting on this topic. Thank you so much to everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next month for our next webinar Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to me, and thank you, Ashley, for giving me this opportunity to speak on the platform.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, bye. Bye.